In advance of this week's anniversary of the assault on our democracy, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has promised that Senate Democrats will do what it takes to protect and strengthen American democracy. In a letter, he vowed to hold a vote on rules changes to the Senate filibuster to move forward on blocked voting rights legislation. Schumer wrote, quote, "Let me be clear. January 6th was a symptom of a broader illness, an effort to delegitimize our election process, warning that without Senate action, the events of January 6th could become the new norm." Schumer stressed, "We must adapt. The Senate must evolve like it has many times before." The Senate will debate and consider changes to Senate rules on or before January 17th, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, assuming that Senate Republicans will continue to block the legislation, which you should. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer joins me now. And, sir, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here. So tell us, what are the specific rules changes that you are considering putting on the floor?
Well, first, Joy, let me just say that what happened on January 6th is a direct continuation of, or the big lie which Donald Trump perpetrated, created January 6th, and that is a continuation of what's happening around the country. You had Mrs. Sicknick on, and we all pray for her in peace and mourn her loss. But right now, election officials, nonpartisan election officials, just plain people who are doing their job to count votes, are being threatened in state after state with violence. A few of them have had to have police protection. So the idea that January 6th is totally a one-off is wrong. It's now being perpetrated by this attempt to take away voting rights of so many people, people of color, young people, people who live in urban areas, handicapped people, elderly people. And so we have to fight against this. And we, as you said, Joy, it would be great if Republicans would join with us. You know, in the past, it was always bipartisan voting rights. President Reagan, President W. Bush, President H.W. Bush, all supported voting rights, and they passed overwhelmingly. But the new Republican Party, under the leadership of Donald Trump, is viciously against voting rights and trying to take those away and jaundice not only our elections, but our whole democracy. So if we can't get Republicans to join us, we are exploring a variety of different rules changes, and we are working and trying to get all 50 Democrats, including Senators Manchin and Sinema, to go along with those rules changes. Because if we don't change the rules, the Republicans will block this, and our democracy could be at risk and even wither in real ways.
And I think everyone who's watching the show agrees with that these voting rules changes must happen because democracy is at stake. But let me present you with a couple of rules change options that have been presented by people, including on this show. So Al Franken, friend of the Readout, and Norm Ornstein have put forward one idea to reform the filibuster, meaning you'd flip the numbers from 60 votes required to end debate to 41 required to continue it, moving the burden from the majority to the minority, meaning the minority could still prevail, but it will require a major effort by the minority to accomplish its ends. And for both sides, bipartisan compromise might be the best way to do that. There's another option, which is by a gentleman named Jeff Blattner, who was the former chief counsel to Senator Ted Kennedy. And this is a reform that could actually work without changing the filibuster at all. So it says this: when it comes to major legislation, it would assure that the minority gets a full debate and the right to offer relevant amendments. After an extended period elapses without offering of an amendment gaining bipartisan support, the supporters of the bill could then move on, invoke cloture, cut off debate by a simple majority vote. The minority would have had its say, boom, and then we can move on, and they can have accepted improvements. Have the two conservative Democrats who've been standing in the way of changing the filibuster signed on to anything that looks like either of those two options?
We are having active discussions with them, several a day. I just spoke to Senator Manchin 3 or 4 hours ago. And even over the holiday break, the New Year's and Christmas break, we've been talking constantly, not just me, but just about every one of the 48 Democratic senators who supports not only the proposal, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Restore the Voting Rights Act, but changing the rules. There are a variety of different rules changes, some of which you've mentioned, some of which you haven't, which we're exploring with them, which we're pushing with them. And whichever one works to get us to have voting rights kept, to undo the pernicious activities of the Republican legislatures, we will accept. And we're having constant discussions. And we've said to them, both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema say they believe in voting rights. Good. That's great. and they are sponsors of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Act. But just to believe in it and not change the rules. And we're making it clear to them, Joy, that even a paragon who believed in the Senate rules, Robert C. Byrd, changed the rules 9 times. And he said, and I think I have his quote pretty accurately here, when circumstances change, the rules have to change. Well, let me tell you something. Circumstances have changed dramatically with Donald Trump, the big lie, the violence of January 6th, and all the efforts to take away voting rights. And just one more point. The link between January 6th and what's happening across the country in Republican legislatures is crystal clear. And we are going to be talking about that link all week.
Well, and I totally agree with that. But I just need to press you again. The second option, this Blattner option, would not require you to make any change to the filibuster at all. You could put the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Act on the floor and essentially make Manchin and Sinema on the floor decide whether they're going to side with voting rights, whether they're telling the truth about supporting it, or whether they're going to side with the Republicans. Are you willing to perhaps put these bills on the floor using that Blattner model, let everyone get their amendments in, et cetera, and make Manchin and Sinema decide?
Yes. The Blattner model is a talking filibuster where the other side would have to talk. And once they stop talking, you would not need 60 votes. That's the rules of the Senate, because cloture wouldn't be there. The only problem with it is...
Could you put the bills on the floor with that?
Got so many fanatics. The bills will be on the floor. Of course, the bills will be on the floor. But then you need a rules change if you're going to do something. And one of the rules changes would be that you can't just... Right now, you can create a filibuster by just sitting in your office and calling up. We'd have to say you'd have to be on the floor and talk about it. That's called a talking filibuster. And it's one of the things we're considering. I don't want to get into the specific details of which ones. We're pushing anything that will get us the John Lewis Act and the Freedom to Vote Act passed and signed into law. There's different roads to Rome here, and there's not one that's better than the other if they work, if they actually allow us to get those bills to become law.
Very quickly, one last person, and this was somebody who you knew well, a friend of yours, the great Harry Reid, who I know will lie in state very soon in the Capitol, my non-related namesake. He said on this show the following. He said the country is better off having a real democracy, not a fake democracy. 60% is not a democracy. He said very clearly, again, later on in the year, get rid of the filibuster. It's nothing. As Barack Obama said at John Lewis's funeral, it's part of the leftovers from the days of slave owners. You've got to get rid of it. It's very bad. Can you tell us any evidence that Manchin or Sinema has given publicly or to you that they care more about voting rights and the democracy continuing than about the filibuster? Because I haven't seen any evidence that they actually have more support for voting rights and democracy than they do for the filibuster.
Yeah. What I can tell you this is they have made even public statements that, particularly Manchin, that he wants to get voting rights done and wants to figure out a way to do it.
But why should we believe that? Why should we believe that? They haven't taken any action.
Well, we got to keep pressing them and pressing them and pressing them until they do. There is too much at risk here. If obviously they were saying yes to us, we wouldn't have to worry about this. But we do have to worry, and we have to keep pushing. But when senators go to them and say, I will lose my election unless we do something about voting rights, when senators come to them and say, we will not have a democracy anymore, not just for 2 years, but for 10 years, and constant senators of all different stripes, including some of our most moderate senators. We have a group of 3 senators who's constantly talking to them, Angus King, John Tester, and the senator from Virginia as well, saying to them, we were not for changing the rules, but we've changed our mind. Too much is at stake. And it's a constant discussion. And we're going to keep going until we succeed. I can't tell you that they've publicly said anything. You know they haven't. I know they haven't. But there's lots of things we're pushing hard on. I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish here. This is an uphill fight, but it's too important to give up on.
Right.
Too important to give up on.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time. Wish we had more time.
Thank you, Joy. And as soon as we hear something publicly, you'll hear from me.
All right. That sounds like a plan. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.